back in the days when vlogging was just gaining in popularity. Long before everything was cinematic, way before sunglasses and boosted boards, most people were filming with one of these, a point-and-shoot camera. And this particular camera, the Canon S100, was actually pretty popular. It originally sold for around $400. Nowadays you can find it used for about $70. A lot has changed in the past 9 years, so how has this camera held up? Well, you get a 12.1 megapixel 1/1.7 size sensor, a zoom lens that's the equivalent of 24 to 120 millimeters, and an aperture range of f2 to f5.9. There's also a built-in ND filter, which is a pretty cool feature for a little point-and-shoot camera like this. Build quality is pretty good. It's a small, pocketable design. I mean, it's not super rugged. You definitely wouldn't want to drop this. It's actually smaller than the average smartphone, though just a little bit thicker. In terms of video, you get 1080p at 24 frames per second, and that's pretty much it. Although we should note the S100 does actually do 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second, but those are at 480p and 240p. You're definitely not buying this camera for slow motion. And there's no mic input on the S100, but the audio is actually pretty good in good conditions. You might have a little bit of trouble if you're in a noisy environment or if there's a lot of wind, but regular everyday use, it's actually pretty decent. Image quality on the S100 is actually pretty good. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to film the rest of the video on the S100 itself. And image stabilization is actually pretty good. It does a decent job of handling these kinds of walk and talk segments. It's also good for like when you're filming handheld at like longer focal lengths, like up to 120 millimeters. Autofocus is okay, but you've got to remember this is a camera that came out long before dual pixel autofocus, so there's times when you're filming and it'll just kind of like drift off to the background for absolutely no reason. One frustrating aspect of the S100, and it was common with a lot of these enthusiast level cameras back in those days, is there's full manual control for photography, but then the second you hit record, whether you're in manual mode or the movie mode, it's full auto, and there's no way around that. For whatever reason, manufacturers back then just didn't think people wanted control of their videos. Another weird problem that I noticed with the S100 is the zoom ring, and I don't know, maybe it's just my camera, but there's a little bit of play in it. It's a little bit loose, and it's right beside the microphone, and you can actually hear that rattling? That's the zoom ring, and the mic picks it up every single time. Like, a lot of these handheld shots, I'm actually having to take my hand and hold the ring in place so that it doesn't move around and kind of film that way. I don't know, that's just something worth noting. Another aspect where the S100 kind of shows its age is there's no touchscreen, and it doesn't flip or articulate in any way, shape, or form. It's literally just part of the camera. You know, there's so many times where when I notice the camera kind of drifting off or missing focus and I want to just tap to focus, and then I realize, oh, that's not an option. That's not available on this camera. Now we have to address the elephant in the room, and that is, with smartphone technology being what it is nowadays, is there still a point to point-and-shoot cameras? You know, nearly 10 years ago when this camera came out, smartphone video was absolutely laughable, but a lot has changed in that time, and so kind of begs the question, do you really need this small, tiny sensor device in your pocket when you already have another small, tiny sensor device in your pocket? Well, to play devil's advocate, these compact cameras have a bigger sensor than what you have in your smartphone. There might be one or two smartphones that are in this same size range, but most smartphones are in the 1/2 size sensor, whereas this is much bigger at 1/1.7. So there is somewhat of a difference. You know, with that larger sensor, you'll actually see better performance in low light with this camera than you will with the phone. Likewise, you'll actually have real bokeh with this camera. Well, as real as it can be with a small sensor, but you'll have better bokeh with this camera over the sort of fake, artificially enhanced bokeh that you'll have on a smartphone. So it does have that going for it. For me personally, I still prefer the look of these compact cameras over a phone right now. But technology grows by leaps and bounds, so that opinion might change a year from now. That opinion might change a month from now. But overall, I do have to say, I like the look of the S100. I mean, in terms of these smaller sensored cameras and phones, the S100 has more of a camera look to it, whereas when I see phone video, no matter how good phone video is, my very first thought is, oh, that was filmed on a phone. I see it right away and I can't unsee that. Whereas this slightly bigger sensor actually has a little bit more of a camera kind of vibe to it. The point being, for right now, as technology is the way it is now, yeah, I actually enjoy it. I mean, and when you factor in that it only costs about $60 or $70, hey, it's worth trying. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.